October 11th, 2022. I'm going to open the meeting at 7:30. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So if we just leave it, we can do it. We just whatever. We don't have glasses on.
And may I have roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Fitzer? Here. Mr. Hara? Mr. Kucera?
Present.
Mr. Nushai?
Here.
Ms. Redmond? Mr. Sinaki?
Present.
And Mr. Tinlin?
Here.
And Mr. Watson. So we're missing two.
And
Okay.
Mr. Watson's on his way, I understand.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes to make to the agenda in front of us?
Do we want to acknowledge Josh or in the roll call, or is that not necessary? He's a newer member.
He's on roll call.
Oh, were you on roll call?
No?
I was not.
Mr. Solomon?
Mr. Solomon, are you here?
I said hello to
I didn't think I.
Okay, I have no changes in the agenda as it stands, and if no one has any problems with it, we don't need to vote on that, we just approve that. So we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the approval of the regular meeting minutes from September 13th, 2022.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes from September 13th, 2022 as published.
Second.
Motion and support. I'm going to need a roll call on that. Joe's got the list.
We'll do the list better this time. I'm just going to go around. Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson? Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
And Mr. Hara?
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 6 is public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will close public discussion, and we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is consideration of a site plan amendment at 655 South Main Street, which is the church at Clausen, the facade. And if Joe wants to start us out through this.
Yes. So you're familiar with this site. Well, most of you are anyway. I know Mr. Solomon's new. So this is the church at Clausen at 655 South Main. You've probably noticed that the facade is under construction at the moment when you drive by. So they have an approved site plan to do that facade, and they are requesting an amendment to that approved site plan. And what you see in the letter, and I'll put it up on the screen too in a second, just for the benefit of folks at home, is that originally they were approved for the front facade and then a little wrap around the side of the north facade. And what they found as they were doing the work is that they had some excess materials, and they thought, well, it'd be kind of nice to just carry this down the north side of the building and get the extra materials that we need to accomplish that. And so that's what they're asking for tonight. They're asking for permission to do the north facade as well as the west facade, which is the front. So what you see in this letter is the originally approved north facade, the new proposed north facade with labeled materials, and then an example of the approximate colors of that facade. Now, what I've noted in the letter is that those colors don't reflect the actual layout. The portico isn't proposed. They've got a slightly different layout for the windows. But that's the rough colors, is that kind of earthy brownish color with the kind of bronzy cap, soffit cap up top, and then the fieldstone at the base and around the door. So, like I said, fieldstone veneer. The siding is hardy plank, which is a cementitious material. They are proposing to widen one of their current doorways into a double door. And then they've got 3 false windows. They look like tinted windows. They're not actual windows. They're actually done over the underlying facade. And then, as I said in the letter, the plank is proposed to be a cedar-like color. So we have a couple design specifications in the BRD1 district. They're pretty simple. Compatibility with surrounding properties and use of similar materials on all facades where feasible. These are the same materials that are being used on the west facade. That was what was approved for the front of the building. So actually, the north side and the west side of the buildings are going to look more similar now than they would have under the original approval. The proposed materials do meet our zoning ordinance requirements for durability and consistency across the whole of the building's exterior. That's the extent of my comments at this point. The changes they're requesting meet the standards of our ordinance. So I'd like to real quick put this up on the screen just so that people who might be following along remotely can. Oh, I don't think I had that one. This is going to be difficult. Okay, so you can see the existing up there. It's the block with a couple of single wide doors and a glass block window system. It's not very clear up there, but the glass block windows are there.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's the original approval, so you can see that it stays the same, except that this wrap of the fieldstone comes around the corner for a portion of the building, all the way over on the right of this image. And then the new request is to take that fieldstone along the base of the building to the area around the doors, which they want to expand into a double door, and then the other door goes away. And then that fieldstone goes up to the above the door, and they've got coping on the top. That's that bronzish color that we were looking at earlier. And then you've got the hardy plank covering most of the rest of the side with those false windows along the kind of like in the lower half of the wall. You can see that the height is also a little different because this makes a parapet which screens the rooftop equipment, which was one of the original requirements of approval, was screening the rooftop equipment. So they were going to use another method to screen that equipment. They're now going to use this parapet effect that this new facade has. And then again, the approximate colors that you'd be looking at. This is the color of that hardy plank, and then the fieldstone, which matches the fieldstone that they've got up there. So if you've looked at the building in daylight, you know what color the fieldstone is. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
It looks good to me. I was in there Saturday, and I like what I see so far, and I see no problems at all wrapping the same material around the north side. Does anyone else have any comments or questions for Joe? Or?
Yeah, I was wondering with the black windows, that's going to be covered then, right, between the hardy? And I'm sure it's to make it symmetrical, because it would be off on what it looks like. So that's just going to be, are you removing it, or? Sorry, I'm kind of having a sign convo on your side convo. Are you removing the black windows, or are you?
I think the siding goes right over.
They're being covered up between the false windows and then the hardy board material that will be there, so you won't see them at all. So on the front right now, you can barely see any of the block window that was on the Main Street side, and the only reason you could see it is because the hardy board has not arrived yet.
Okay.
So, but they will be covered up here, hopefully in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Making progress, yeah. In the false windows, that's just economically more feasible then, or?
It's two things. It's definitely more economically feasible, but then, you know, with the false windows there, part of the false windows on the front is there's never been windows since we bought the building that were usable to even see out of in the first place, right? So it would require a complete redo of everything on the inside, not just the economic feasibility of what it would do to the outside to put the window in, but then change wall structure on the inside. And so since we had no intention or need to do it that way, we just wanted it to look warm and welcoming from the outside. So the false windows, we felt like achieved that purpose to make it look warm and welcoming without costing us money we did not have.
Yeah, yeah.
When do you expect to see the siding come in?
The siding,
Yeah,
so
there.
the siding order was placed a couple months ago, got delayed once, and we've been told it should be here at the latest by the end of October.
Oh.
And so we are planning to put up furring strips in the next couple of weeks to prepare, so as soon as the hardy board comes in, hopefully it would go up within 2 or 3 days.
You get it up before it snows.
That is the plan, and I'll use a little Jesus term here, Lord willing, we would also have that front facade done. We have done our homework on, or by front, for me, it's the parking lot side, right, where we enter the building at. That would be done before the winter as well. So
On the original site plan approval, you were changing the lighting in the parking lot. I believe you did that. You changed the lighting post,
we
right?
did that almost immediately.
Yeah, and I don't recall if we had other items on there or not that had to be done. And there was something about the parking and something about plantings or something. I don't know if anybody recalls.
There may have been something about flower boxes, I believe, that were in that median strip.
Yeah.
So this is the north facade. What about the west-facing facade? Or what faces Main Street?
That is almost done.
Okay.
That is, we're just waiting for that hardy board that,
Okay, so that's going to be
Been
the same
delayed.
thing, it's just, okay.
it's just it's all the same material. It's going to it'll make the building look complete, right? So the south facade is barely seen.
Right.
Just because, well, part of it is because the Detroit Sports Collectibles and Perry's Pizza covers up a good chunk of that facade. But for us, that north facade was so visible, and in many ways more visible than Main Street, because you can see it for so long because of the gap of other buildings. So I was happy, last time when we met, that you graciously allowed us to do the Main Street facade and gave us the time needed. But in my mind, I was going, I'm coming back to ask to do the parking lot facade because it will make the building as a whole look complete. Whereas most of the buildings on Main Street, you see barely any of the side of the building. But with ours, you see that whole facade, and I never thought it would look right if all we did was the Main Street side.
Yep, that
So
makes
I went,
sense.
so I went, thank you, and I'm gonna get that done, but in my mind, I was going, I'm coming back to go, let's make this look better. And so we'll be happy with it as a church, and I figured as a city and as a group, you would go, yes, we want that to look better too, so.
I think that's fair.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. For approval.
Can you make a motion?
Sure. I have to ask a question. This is a motion to accept the amendment to the site plan?
Yeah, motion to approve the amendment to the site plan, yes.
Give me a second to go back to page one.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the amendment to the site plan at 655 South Main, which is the north facade renovation redo. And this is an amendment to an already approved site plan, and it meets, and it has a recommendation from our city planners.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and support, and I'm going to need roll call again. Joan, your cue.
Okay.
Mr. Newshy?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Sanaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
And then we have Mr. O'Hara. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Welcome to class again.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Moving on to agenda number 8 is discussion of the sign ordinance amendments with a full draft.
Yeah, so, hold on one second, I'm just recording the motion here for Nick. So, we've been talking about signs for a while now, and at the last meeting, we looked at a complete, clean draft, and we had a couple of discussion points where we wanted a couple changes last time, so I've made those changes. And I'll point out what they are in just a second. I just got to get it all open. So, yeah, I've got different page sizes in the packet, and the first page of my memo is coming up super tiny. I gotta be able to actually see it here. Okay. So we have our intent statement and our definitions, and then we move into our general regulations. Trying to get the other PDF open here, sorry. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about last time was on page 7 of that memo, where we talk about illumination. It's item 9 down near the bottom of the page. We were talking about being a little more clear, or I guess it's actually, and then the way the memo changes more at the top of page 7. we were talking about having a somewhat more legible standard for where to measure light from and how to measure it. And what we wound up adding was, in no event shall light from an illuminated sign shine directly on adjacent property which is used for residential purposes. That was the original language. And then we added, light levels from illuminated signs shall not exceed 0.3 foot candles at the residential property line measured at 5 feet above grade. So we're giving a location and a height where you measure the light if there's a complaint about the sign or an obvious problem with the sign. And we can use equipment that we've already got to make that measurement. And if the sign is putting out too much light, it's going to be really bright at the property line. We're going to register that with our light meter, and then we'll be able to tell them to turn the sign down. So that, I think, was a positive change. I think it gives our code enforcement people a little more to work with if there is an issue with a lighted sign shining on a residential property. The next item was about signage in the CR district, and in the most recent version of the memo, that is on page, should be 10 or 11. Oops, went right past it. It is page 11, item 4, signage in the CR district. All signs promoted in the CR district shall be subject to the following requirements. What we had in the original version was that there was a wall sign and a freestanding sign permitted. You could have both of them. And we talked through it last time, and the CR district is a district that is primarily, at present, single-family homes. And the idea of the CR district is that you might be able to convert one of those homes for business purposes. And so we're allowing a certain amount of signage, but because the area still has a residential character, in our discussion at the last meeting, we thought, okay, why don't we restrict the signage a little more and have either or? You can have the wall sign or you can have the freestanding sign. So the way the language has changed from last time is that it's now an either or proposition. Before, you could have the wall sign and the freestanding sign. Now it's you can have one or the other. And the freestanding sign is a little bit smaller than the wall sign area. It's 8 square feet versus 12 square feet. And then the third change from last time has to do with the landmark sign provision, which is a new thing in your sign ordinance, and that is on page 13 of the new memo. It's item H, landmark signs. So last time we had a somewhat more limited set of standards, and I've altered the structure a little bit. So we had process, locations, and criteria for approval last time, and now what we have is a couple extra items. So we still have process. Landmark signs are subject to site plan review and approval by the Planning Commission in accordance with the standards for site plan review of the Clawson zoning ordinance. Landmark signs may also be approved as part of a larger site plan. Then the locations is still the same, CC and CMD districts on property that fronts on 14 Mile or Main Street, and then within 100 feet of the boundary of the city at certain entrances, major roads. And then I've split criteria for approval up into mandatory criteria for approval and other criteria for approval. So we have 3 mandatory criteria. One is that the sign shall not be injurious to the public health, safety, and welfare. 2 is that the location and scale of the sign will be compatible with adjacent uses. And 3 is that the sign is designed to be durable and an acceptable plan for its maintenance has been submitted to the city. And then the other criteria for approval is you have to meet one or the other. The sign preserves, revives, or restores a documented historical element of the site, and the site enhances the municipal identity of the city of Clawson or provides a gateway feature for the city or its downtown. And then following that, we have a new item that explicitly says the planning commission may place conditions on its approval that it finds to be consistent with the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the city, its residents, and visitors. And that was, we talked about that last time, just being really clear that you can place conditions on that approval as you feel are necessary to protect people and make sure that this sign is going to work going forward. So an expansion of that section, and those are the changes from last time. I know not all of you were here last time, but that's what came out of our discussion last time.
Joe, do you have any examples of what might be a type of sign that might apply to this, or someone that might try and get it historical?
The marquee that says Clawson down on Three Cats would be one.
Which
of
one?
these.
I'm sorry.
The marquee that says Clawson down on Three Cats.
Okay.
That would definitely be one.
Okay, good.
And, you know, let's say the big shoe on top of the shoe repair place. If something were to happen to that, you couldn't put it up under could it back up under our current sign ordinance because it's not permitted under our current sign ordinance. But if something were to happen to it under this, you'd have a process for putting it back up because you'd be able to document that it's a historical sign on the site and that you're restoring it to, you know, a historical condition.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, that's why they're working around the chicken to keep it up there. They can't take it down, they have to work around it.
Right, yeah.
Leave it on the building.
Dance around the chicken.
My only question is if under H here, the landmark signs, it seems a little odd. It says something about in order to enhance or preserve the character of a district, recognize the history of a given site, or create a community landmark. So somebody could actually create a landmark?
Yeah, and that's really what the second criterion for approval speaks to, is the sign enhances the municipal identity of the city of Clawson or provides a gateway feature for the city or its downtown. So the thinking there is if someone wants to put up a sign on their property near one of the gateways to the city, saying you're coming up Main Street or coming in from the east on Rochester or something like that. Those are among the areas that are mentioned. You could put some sort of welcome to Clawson feature out on your property under this proposal, and it would be in addition to the regular signage that you would get on your site.
Let's say somebody comes in, they want to put up a 10-foot duck. Where do we stand on that?
Well,
Because it hasn't been there before, but
gee, Rennis, do you think that would be a sign?
What are you referring to?
just somebody want to put up a 12-foot duck. Oh, 'cause
A big duck might not even be a sign. That's the thing.
that falls under symbols, and we affect that differently.
Yeah. Yeah, art and signs. It's a fine distinction. Yeah, the idea is that if someone wanted to do something like that, have a sign that was a kind of welcome to Clawson or, you know, thank you, come again kind of sign on their property. This would allow that to happen. I think the city center and the CMD districts are probably the places where you're most likely to see an application of this because we've seen people do this kind of thing before. And it was partly inspired by that Clawson marquee down there, just thinking, well, how can you make a process that would allow something like that in the future? Because we do have, you know, quite a lot of history in the downtown. And you think about the corner where the Pizza Hut was and what might happen with that in the future. You could potentially do something that echoes past development on that site, and that might be a little bit in addition to storefront signs that would otherwise be allowed on the building. So just trying to kind of allow for a little bit of creativity that maybe falls a bit outside what we typically permit.
So Joe, with this, you're saying that it doesn't count against your sign square footage.
right, exactly.
Okay, and with, the only thing that I have a question on is, well, for now, when it says that it must meet the scale and, look of adjacent signs, I mean, isn't that kind of contrary to what this ordinance actually is, because it is not meeting those guidelines?
Well, I think it's a bit of a discretionary standard. Like, we're just saying compatible with adjacent uses. We're not necessarily saying that the sign has to be the same size. We're just saying it can't be
It doesn't say size on there?
huge.
I thought it did.
It says location and scale.
Oh.
So if someone came in with something that was just absolutely gigantic, it gives the planning commission the ability to say, whoa, okay, we like the idea, but this isn't Las Vegas, this is Clawson, so can we dial it down a little bit?
Yeah, I just always thought that was like those arbitrary type things just opens us up to a lot of messiness, and a lot of people crying, yeah, but the shoe, but the what, marquee, I mean, that's kind of massive. It fits scale of its own building.
Sure.
And this does not, the signs do not have to specifically relate to the history of that specific site, right? It's not like, there was a pharmacy there once, like, they don't have to connect it in that way to the history, just the history of Clawson in general. Is that correct?
Well, so the historical thing, it's a documented historical element of the site.
The site itself.
So the site itself.
So we
yeah.
couldn't move the chicken across the street and say, we want this icon. Well, sorry, the chicken's not a sign.
Chicken cannot
Okay.
cross the road. No.
Yeah, and the chicken's not a sign, I guess. But I do wonder why the shoe's a sign, but the
Storm
chicken's
it up
not. But I don't know, because
Yeah.
there's letters on the shoe. But, okay. But you can't take something from the historic resemblance of Clawson in itself and say, I want to bring that into this site. It would seem like there should be a little variance for that, like if there's something.
Well, you could say site or city. That would be the way to affect that. I was keeping the scope a little bit more narrow than that. But if people think that the history of the site or the city is something that we should be aiming for, that we could just add or the city.
Well, I'm just throwing it out. I don't know if that's something, obviously, within parameters, right? We could pull almost anything out from a history of a city, good and bad, things we might not want to represent. That's just one of the questions I had, I guess.
So right now, we're looking at the history of the site, the way it's written currently.
Okay.
And we have removed murals from the sign ordinances and put them someplace else?
Right. So right now they're in the memo of stuff that's leaving the sign ordinance, and I haven't done anything with them. But I am working on an actual draft mural ordinance that would actually just be for murals, and it would be separate from the sign ordinance. So the memo is titled "Things Moving to the Zoning Ordinance," but that's a little misleading because that item is in there. It was mostly I wanted to park that language somewhere. I don't want to put it in the zoning ordinance though, because then nonconformities come into play, and that kind of creates its own set of problems. But what we have right now, and when we can talk about the mural language in some depth here, because one thing I want to do actually tonight is ask you about some goals you might have for murals in the city, and that will guide kind of how we direct the language of a mural ordinance. But I was going somewhere with that. I interrupted myself, and then I lost my train of thought. Anyway, a separate ordinance for murals is something that's in the works, and it would consider them kind of as part of its own ordinance. And
So, Joe, can I ask a question? Do we have a mural ordinance now or nothing on the
right,
books?
what you've got now is just a couple little paragraphs that are in your sign ordinance. But generally speaking, we kind of want to get that out of the sign ordinance because we don't want to be calling a mural a sign. I can actually just go to it now because we're talking about it. So right now, what you've got about murals is, I mean, it's short enough that I can just read it. It says, murals defined as wall signs by this chapter may be considered by the Planning Commission upon recommendation of the building department and/or planning consultant, provided that the following criteria are met. The commercial message, text and/or corporate symbols is limited to no more than 25% of the total mural area. The mural complements the building's colors and aesthetics, and the mural is found by the Planning Commission to be a public benefit, i.e. art. So you were just talking about, we were all just talking about, oh God, we've got to figure out what's art. So that's kind of a touchy standard that we've already got in our sign ordinance. And based on the discussion tonight, we're going to come up with an approach to murals that makes us comfortable. So we don't have a ton of murals in town, but we do have a few. And one of them is on the back of White Wolf. They came in for Planning Commission approval for that. There's, I think everybody knows the old House of Optical one, which of course House of Optical's moved. But then there's the one on the south side of the Clausen Grill space as well. Help me out, Joan. Am I missing any?
There's just a small one on the west side of Mojave.
Oh, right. Yeah, the little one on the west side of Mojave, too. So, like I said, we don't have a ton of murals right now. And what I wanted to discuss with you tonight, and we might as well do it now, and we can get back into science after we discuss it, is what do you want for the city of Clausen when it comes to murals? Do we want a lot of murals? Do we, you know, an example of a community locally that has a ton of them now is Berkeley. They're just all over the place in Berkeley, all down 11 Mile, up Coolidge, 12 Mile, there's just murals everywhere. And the reason for that is that they wanted a lot of them, and they were aggressive about courting businesses through their DDA to put up murals and connect with artists. They had a whole program. And what they have is a subcommittee of their DDA that looks at murals and approves them or asks for changes. And so it's really done kind of almost on I don't want to say an informal basis, but it's a much less formal basis. So kind of depending on what we want, that's going to guide us toward a process. And if we want a lot of them, then we probably need to come up with some proactive ways to get more of them. And we might change the approval process entirely because coming to the Planning Commission is a bit of a hurdle for getting a mural approved. But if we're kind of fine with where we are, then we probably would keep our process roughly intact. We might just change the language around it and our approval criteria to give us a little bit more to work with. And then the other thing that I think is very important is maintenance standards, because when a mural gets to be 5-6 years old, that's when the paint starts chipping or fading and things, and we want to make sure that they're either being kept up or removed or replaced once they start to deteriorate. But I guess I'll throw it back to you for your thoughts. Like, how do we feel about murals? What do we want out of them for our city?
Joe, I was going to go with the maintenance thing as you were talking. Is there a standard for paints and things like that when you guys put
That's
forth?
something we can actually put in the ordinance, yeah, because there are certain paints that are very good for murals, and it depends a little bit on the surface that you're painting on. And then there are others that are not so good that will deteriorate a lot faster. So there's kind of I don't know if industry standard is really the right term for it, but there are widely accepted best materials for murals. And a lot of the local ordinances and mural programs have homed in on what those are, and we can follow their lead, basically.
And would that be something that, like, the building department would cite them and ultimately, like, they come cut grass, give them a ticket for cutting the grass? Like, if they're not maintaining it and it's like peeling in an eyesore, is that something that we would be able to enforce in that way?
Yeah,
Or
ultimately, it's a code enforcement issue, and if we've got maintenance standards in an ordinance, then that's what they would point to. They would say, our maintenance standards should give examples of what qualifies as deterioration. And, flaking would definitely be one thing that would qualify as deterioration. And that way you actually have a set of criteria that you're looking at when you look at the mural. And you can say, okay, we have flaking, we have fading, and we have a big scrape down the side. So it's not really looking like it's not looking very fresh anymore. We need something to happen here.
And, well, I could see like the alley being a great place for a mural, although the city, I don't think, owns the walls on those. So have we given any thought to shared spaces and shared walls versus like how that might work out in like, I would think that if we did want to open up murals, we would center in on like the best places that, because they seem like they'd be like an experience to bring people into walking and,
Right.
Viewing them. So it would seem like there's particular areas that would be more.
We have a lot of businesses downtown that ask all the time about murals. There are a lot of interest in doing more. And we've looked at it in the DDA as more of a public art policy, with murals being part of public art, and actually having a committee that would review them, so it would be members of the DDA Design Committee, maybe some Planning Commission meeting members, and local artists. And then there are a lot of standards for how to do this. And as far as putting it up, then there's a contract with the building owner. And as far as maintenance, there's a lot of things that are already set up. But bringing different members together, it's would be helpful to have members of this board, this commission, the design committee members, business owners, and then and we would set some sort of standards, some sort of criteria for. Although again, with art, you have to leave that open, but building owner could propose something and it could be reviewed. Or if they were just looking for, we'd like a mural and we're open to something, we could invite artists to propose something that could then be voted on. So there are a lot of different ways to go about it.
Do you guys find that color coordinating, like, I'm sure you don't want to Mod Podge, right? Like, there's a way to make it seem congruent while harnessing the different aspects of art versus like, it looks just not uniform in the way that it's completely different. Is there a color scale that you go with, even if it's?
I don't think you can limit art to just a color scale. Again, it would be if the business owner has something they would like to propose, then that could be something that could be under review by the committee and make a recommendation. If it is something where they're inviting artists in, again, same group would help to determine that along with the business owner and then go from there.
So there's no neon colors versus like.
Well, I think you can set those kind of things.
Well, when I
You
say
can-
color scale, I mean like the tone scale of it. Like, I guess I don't know. I'm not an artist, so
I think
I'm using wrong words.
we've already looked at some things. I think neon colors and would be out. So there would be some things of just it has to fit, just like the sign ordinance says, it needs to fit the neighborhood. We would kind of be looking at hopefully something like that. So, but again, that's why you need a selection of people on the board. I may not like a certain type of art, but somebody else says, well, I think that's very modern. And I like that look. So it would be up to a group of, say, probably 5 people maybe, where it's certainly an odd number, but manageable, where you could look at those. But there would be some standards, some criteria to start with.
Some of it goes to approach. So there are communities that proactively engage artists to create murals. And if you are the one reaching out, if you're putting some money in, you can say, here's our theme. And we want you to paint a mural that fits this theme. And that theme could include a color palette or something like that. But when you have people approaching you requesting to put a mural on their building, to pay an artist to put a mural on their building or something, then I think you have to loosen things up a little bit. So it's kind of a matter of who's in the driver's seat. If the city or DDA really wants to get in the driver's seat and push it, I think there's a lot more room for putting a theme or more constraints on it from a design perspective. And if it's more of an open, hey, come to us if you want a mural, then I think you put fewer constraints on it, and you kind of see what comes your way.
Joe, can I ask you a question? So you were talking about Berkeley, use those as an example. What is your personal thought on Berkeley and their ability to put murals is where they want? What do you think about
Well,
it?
I mean, I live there, and I love it. I think it's really cool. There's so many good ones. I mean, actually, one of my favorite ones was the deer with the pyramid, and it got hit by a car, and they had to replace it. But they replaced it right away because there's a very strong maintenance standard in place. And there's a few great ones, and they've let people really kind of explore with it. The neighborhood market has one on the side of it. It's 2 cars, and their headlights actually are lights that are applied to the wall, and they shine at night, and they're little solar-powered lamps. And actually, Royal Oak has one kind of like that. It's on the side of Owl over on Woodward. They've got one that has a map of the Woodward corridor, and Woodward Avenue is a strip of neon. It's not neon, it's LEDs, but it looks like neon. And so it's possible to get very, very creative and far out there with these things. But most of them are paint. And I think there's some great ones. There's a couple that I'm a little less into over in Berkeley, but I think overall it's been a net positive for Berkeley. I think it's made it a more visually interesting place. And quite frankly, there were some really drab spaces in Berkeley that were very much brightened up by the murals that were put into them, kind of old parking lots and things that now suddenly look a lot better.
I have a question too.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Sure, go.
Yeah, so we're kind of talking about the signage that led to this conversation about art. So you're also talking about who's commissioning the art. So if a business commissions an art piece, how do we not make it a sign? And that, is it the same scale of 25% of the art has to, or less has to be the name? Or, I mean, just what's the requirements there? And
Right.
Our thought.
So, I mean, I know just from Berkeley that they're pursuing the murals, and they're not allowing logos and business names and things in those murals. It's got to just be art, and it's not necessarily going to be completely unrelated. There's a doggy daycare that has a dog on the side of it, but it's a very cool looking mural of a dog, and I think that if you're going into the mural territory, you're probably looking for something that is not explicitly related to the business. Subject matter might be tangentially related, but in terms of, it's not an advertisement for the business, because I think that is when it starts to kick over into being a sign.
so we can have some kind of language
Yeah.
on what's considered art versus, yeah, okay.
Hey, we lost the one that we had several years ago. You remember where the frame shop was?
Yeah, yep.
They
Yeah, that was the
painted-
one I was thinking of,
They painted
yeah.
4 or 5 aliens on the side of their building back there, and he didn't know he couldn't do it. And then he came in, and I think we charged him a fee for doing it. And he said he was going to repaint it every 3 months or so, but the building got torn down. That's part of the ACE project now.
Yeah. Yeah, the aliens, and then the old, it was the old House of Optical one too, with all the characters from various movies. I think, but they had Jake and Elwood on there and their sunglasses and stuff like that.
Joe, how much of running into content moderation, I think I remember it was either Berkeley or Royal Oak, just the community forums. I use political in a very loose term, right? Not like one side versus, but like, I think that there were some uproars from the community about certain political meanings behind a certain sign. Is there something, a way that Berkeley has addressed that seems to kind of just keep things nice and light and about the city and not drive any one direction in division?
Well, I mean, we live in 2022, and I think everything is political.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, it's just really, I mean, it's to a degree, even cars are political, you know? I mean, it's kind of, it's just where we are as a society. But in terms of when things get a little more explicitly political or, you know, you have potential coding of political messages via symbols and things like that. You know, there may be some things we can do, but also, you know, if it's coded, people reviewing the mural might not understand what the code is.
Well, true,
You
and I was
know?
just wondering, you know, we brought up sign ordinance in the name of not, you know, regulating the content of the signs, right? And I know that's still very much not, it's hard to put that into a legal term, I guess, right? Because it's very hard not to, especially in art. So it doesn't seem like that's something we should pursue, because that puts us in kind of a dangerous territory in a written way.
I'd be cautious about putting anything in writing about that. I mean, I know they had a controversy over in Sterling Heights where they put a big mural on a fire station. They had, you must have heard about this, and it had, what was it, first responders or something, and a big American flag, and it was, there were people in the community who complained about the, you know, potential political message of that sign, and it caused a pretty big ruckus in that city. And, you know, it's probably something nobody anticipated going in, you know, but it's, I guess it's kind of the risk you take when you're looking to make your community a little more colorful and interesting, is that there's always a little bit of risk that you're assuming. And if you do wind up with a controversy like that, you just sort of have to fight your way through it. But for the most part, you know, that's not really a problem. Most murals are pretty innocuous, and most people don't give them a second thought after, except for, oh, hey, that's cool.
Any further questions? Where to go from here? This is a discussion of the sign ordinance. Do you want us to recommend that you?
Oh, I have questions about the sign ordinance. Sorry, I thought you were asking for mural. Are you closing the whole sign ordinance thing?
Well, it's the agenda item that we're discussing.
Yeah, that's what we're on. So,
We're discussing.
yeah, if there's more,
I just wanna know if we're-
questions about it, then let's get through those questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Is
I
he seeking
apologize.
our approval to send this on to mayor and council in this form, or?
Ultimately, yes. We might take one more look at it, though, because I don't know what the
Okay.
questions are going to be, so. let's get through questions.
Sorry, I
first.
thought we were just closing up mural. So the couple of things that you pointed out, remind me if we discussed the CR district and the size in proportion with the 8 square feet and the 12 square feet?
We did. In fact, it was 12 and 12 last time.
Okay.
And we changed the freestanding ones to 8.
So 2 by 6, so that could be on a house, right? The 12 square feet one? It seems big to me, but I guess if we already discussed it, I don't want to like bring it up again. And it just seems like, especially if depending on the house, it could be like the whole side wall almost. But then, okay, so also the lighting, I thought we also talked about lighting on main roads in the luminous of like distracted driving and being too bright. Was that something we're putting somewhere else, or?
We really just have it under electronic signs. It's kind of hard to make a box sign so bright that it like impairs people's driving. I guess you could do it, but it's not as big a problem as, because with the electronic signs you're seeing the lighting element directly, whereas with a box sign the light is being filtered by the sign itself, the panel of the sign. So I didn't put an ambient standard on the box signs. I just put one on the electronic signs, partly because electronic signs these days are all designed to be able to do that. They're all designed to be able to dim in appropriately. And then also, so it's not going to be a technical challenge, but then also that lighting element is directly visible. So if it's too bright, it's a real glare issue, and it causes very direct problems for people on the roadway.
Yeah, I thought we talked a little bit about that, like saying, hey, you gotta go turn it down a couple notches, but there's nothing that we have to put in there to be able to go tell them, turn it down a
No,
notch
because
or
we've
two?
got the
All right.
measurement at the property line for residential properties, so I think if something's a real nuisance, then we're probably gonna be able to handle it that way.
Okay. And my last question was with the A-frames. There, and I'm sure that this might not matter because we've got distance between, but is there a number of like A-frame signs that we want to say, like one building could potentially put out, or one, property, one, because I know it says like, I forget, it talks about how many feet on each side it can be, the A-frame sign, but I don't think we talked about like how many A-frames. Is that something that we would want to determine in that, or no?
Let me see here.
I believe it is.
Is it? Oh, okay, maybe I just read over that.
I'm just confirming that it's there. Has to be placed within 20 feet of the main entrance of the establishment. Minimum of 50 feet apart. Let's see.
I think it maybe got left out, unless I'm missing it somewhere, which could be, so.
Did you just say 50 feet apart?
Yeah, 50 feet apart.
No, I'm saying how many they can have on a property.
How many one business could put out?
Right.
Well, if they're 50 feet apart, it would depend upon your frontage.
Businesses, yeah.
Right, yeah, I mean,
It was 20 foot from the door?
it has to be within 20 feet of the door, yeah, of the main entrance to the establishment.
Well, then you can only really have two.
40 feet apart.
Well, which is
20 foot either way, yeah.
which is not 50 foot apart, so it's kind of redundant.
Right.
Right, I guess it is functionally limited to one. If we wanted to explicitly say just one per establishment, we could do that. But you're right, it is functionally limited to one.
Okay.
I thought it also read that if you put one of those A-frames up, it's supposed to come in after business hours.
Yeah.
Was that in there too?
I read that someplace
Yeah,
last time.
it shall not be displayed outside of operating hours.
I don't think that's an enforced thing around town. I don't
No,
know.
I don't-
I don't know of anybody that takes those things in.
No,
I don't see those coming in at all. Yeah.
It gives you a chance to fix the problem if it creates a problem, though. You know, if someone's leaving it out and it's a real issue, then you can go tell them, hey, when you're closed, take this thing inside.
So I have a problem when math doesn't work. Okay. So you either say it's 20 feet of the main entrance door, and you could have two and they'd be 40 feet apart, or you get rid of the statement about 50 feet because that's not, the geometry doesn't work.
Well,
And
I
then-
think,
Then that raises a statement, well, you got confusing statements in there. Is it 50 feet or is it 20 feet?
I think what you would do is you'd replace the minimum of 50 feet apart with a one per establishment standard. And that way, you still get your sign, but you have the same functional effect, which is that each establishment gets one of these things.
Why
But
would-
it's a little clearer and you don't have confusion about, well, what if I want to put two out? They have to be 50 feet apart, but they have to be within 20 feet of my main entrance. So that doesn't work mathematically. So we could replace D with a limitation on the number per
I would
establishment.
think it would just make sense, like, yeah, if you set a limit, then you don't have to worry about, like Ed said, if math doesn't work, then just make it one sign, because that should be sufficient for any business that can meet that criteria.
And would we run into a problem where there's multiple establishments within one building that,
If there's multiple tenant spaces, then
I'm thinking like upstairs,
everybody
downstairs
gets
kind of
one.
thing. Not that I think downtown, those uppers, they don't really put out signs at this point, but I guess I didn't know if that would run into an issue.
you could specify that it's for ground floor uses.
Okay.
Need any further discussion?
I have one more question, because it was interesting. I didn't know we were removing things. I thought we were just rearranging and enhancing.
Sure.
So for the things that we removed, if we send the sign ordinance that had, for instance, murals in it currently, and we send a revision to council and it gets approved, and we're still working on murals, how do we prevent a free-for-all?
Right, so it's.
Do we have an addendum that says that these things that were not transferred are
To
on a
come?
moratorium, if that's the right word? Are they,
Want me to handle it?
do they apply, do the old standards still apply until the new one is implemented? You know,
Right. So the timing becomes important there. So it's a matter of, do we want council to be acting on this before we've done something with murals? And I think we should probably take a crack at doing something with murals and then have council act on it. So I'm thinking that we're probably not setting a hearing on this right now. We're probably gonna
How long
take.
to make Taco Bell wait? Which is, you know, I don't see, based upon the half-hour discussion on murals, that is going to be a short discussion.
It may
There's a
not
lot
be,
of
yeah.
scenarios. So I would suggest that we want to finish what we have
Mm-hmm.
and figure out some way, and we've got, you know, our council here to help us with that, that says that here's a list of bullet point things that did not transfer, they're in process, and what do we do with them, you know,
Right.
while they're in this, you know, transition time.
So
And that would be up to recommendations from council.
So, keeping in mind that I have one question on one of the things that's moving to the zoning ordinance, but the things that are moving to the zoning ordinance, that's easy enough to time so that there's no lapse in regulation. So we've got drive-throughs and gas stations have some standards that are in the sign ordinance now that we're moving to the zoning ordinance. We can have a public hearing and it can go to council at the same time as signs. And if they adopt them at the same time, the regulation just moves from one ordinance to the other, and there's no lapse. But then as far as murals is concerned,
I think the moratorium.
a moratorium is probably the right.
Yeah, moratorium suggestion makes perfect sense, Mrs. Hanaki. I think that's council, we can present it to council along with the ordinance, the proposed ordinance, and it would achieve everything that we need to achieve. And you can make it subject to this body presenting back to council the mural ordinance. Right.
Makes sense. I think if you
You may
wrap it
say
that
so
way.
yourself, yes.
No, it's a very good question, though, and an important question, so I appreciate you bringing it up. But yeah, I would say that's the way we do it, is the things that are moving to the zoning ordinance go to council at the same time as the sign ordinance. There's no interruption there, just moves. And then the murals go under a moratorium until we figure out how we're handling it. As far as the things that are moving to the zoning ordinance, I did have one highlighted item in that memo. It says sign-related zoning items. It's pretty deep into the packet. It's the 29th page of the packet. So I highlighted drive-up, drive-in uses, such as fast food restaurants, may be permitted in the BRD1 district after special land use approval, subject to the following standards, and there's some standards. So when the BRD1 district was adopted, BRD1 district, Josh, you might not know where it is because you're brand new to the Planning Commission. It's at the south end of Main Street. So from the border with Royal Oak up to, what's the cross street? It's like 5 blocks. And the church we were talking about today is in the BRD1 district. When the BRD1 district was adopted, the barbecue place was an A&W. It was a drive-up restaurant. And that's obviously gone now. And I wondered if we were interested in still allowing drive-up and drive-in uses in the BRD1 district. Because that's a small lot. It doesn't seem like a good fit for the district, really. When A&W was built 60 years ago or whatever it was, they built everything smaller. Things fit on sites a little differently. We probably didn't have any standards governing anything, So they just sort of did it. And it just strikes me that if you were to get such a restaurant now, you'd probably have to wipe 4 or 5 sites clean to even put one of these things in these days. So I'm not sure it's an appropriate use for the BRD1 district at this point. I think it's probably, my recommendation would be to take it out and not have those uses in the BRD1 district.
Is that specific to like drive-through food, or what about banking and things like that?
It says such as fast food restaurants. So what we could do if we wanted to allow a bank, or the car wash that's already there, we could specify those things in the list of permitted uses and say these are okay. But do you want another car wash necessarily?
Well, no,
You
but
just
if
wanna allow
we're
the
writing
one
an
that's
ordinance for
there.
right now versus like the potential uses of it, that car wash could be gone and.
Yeah, I think you are writing for the potential uses.
Right.
So if the car wash goes away, what do we want to go there in its place?
Joe, where are you reading this from?
I'm not offended by them, I guess.
Where are you reading this
Near
from?
the end somewhere.
This is from the memo titled Sign-Related Zoning Items. In your packet, it's page 29 of 35.
Do we have an issue with the car wash that I didn't know about? You're talking the one on Main Street, right?
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't, unless residents seem to be bothered by noise at night or whatever, I guess I wouldn't think it would. People complain a lot about the auto places and the hair salons, but I don't think they've ever said, no, not another car wash.
I think it's a non-conforming use, actually. I'll check on that, but I don't think those are permitted in that district.
Which car
The
wash?
car wash, I think it's a non-conforming use. Let me check on
What's a
that.
non-conforming, Joe?
The car wash on Main Street, South Main. Let me verify that it's even in the BRD one, but,
Well, what's our master plan say about the BRD1 district? Is it small businesses, offices that abut residential areas
so.
that serve the community? And if that's so, if that's the intent of the BRD1 district, and drive-through fast food restaurants are not, that section of the city is not really an area that you would think that drive-throughs would be profitable, because it's not like a 14-mile or a 15-mile where there's a lot of traffic going through and they say, okay, I want to drive through. So
Right.
if it's not appropriate in the BRD1 district, then I guess we could propose in the master plan that comes out, and in the process of that, this section would come out of the ordinance for BRD1 district. It would apply, or whatever you have that applies in the other areas, make it reasonable, but I don't know South Main Street abutting Royal Oak. There's nothing really except for local traffic.
Right.
That's mostly in that area, and since the restaurant that it is there is no longer a drive-through,
And
it makes sense to consider that.
you're getting to some important points there. One is our zoning ordinance reflects what the master plan said about the BRD1 district, because we have a purpose statement for the BRD1 district. And basically what it talks about is, I don't want to read the whole thing because it's really long, but it's intended as a gateway into the city from the south. It acknowledges that most of the parcels in the district are small. They don't have a functional layout, a lot of them right now. A lot of them have improper access. There's little to no landscaping. The uses that, we want to permit there are things that are going to provide a vibrant entrance to the city. It's intended to provide opportunities for a variety of office and commercial uses that serve the needs of the community. Smaller scale commercial and office-based uses that will serve the needs of the residential neighborhoods in the adjoining areas, which to me, that's not a drive-through. Car wash, maybe, yeah, because.
Or even a bank, or a bank, no, I guess,
Yeah, probably. But financial institutions are permitted in the district.
okay, so when we remove drive-through, it's just gonna be specifically to food then?
It would be if we would just remove this portion, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just don't think drive-through restaurants fit that intent for the district. They're not. They're not that. They're not small-scale businesses that serve the neighboring residents. They're for car traffic, and Main Street isn't a major road, especially south of 14 Mile. It's a road you don't want to increase a lot of traffic on, and drive-throughs do nothing but increase traffic. So I really think that it's just something that just needs to be taken out. I don't see keeping it in there. The one establishment that it was meant to accommodate is gone. So,
It's not in the district you're speaking about now, but 2 doors south of here is the Clausen Kitchen. And they have a drive-through in the back with a speaker system. And it's very helpful for their business. I think they probably do more business through that drive-through than they do through the actual sit-down restaurant part.
probably, yeah.
And I'm assuming they've been grandfathered in for years on that.
Yeah, I would say so.
But I couldn't see like a McDonald's or any larger place wanting that spot.
It's not the kind of site they're looking for.
Yeah, it's not the location they were
Yeah.
after.
Yeah.
I don't see it being a threat that anybody would want to open one in the district. So whether it's on the ordinance or not, I don't see it as a problem.
But your thought is to remove this language so that there's just no consideration for it,
Right,
correct?
exactly. Fast food restaurants just not, with a drive-through, they're just not permitted here. Carryouts, sure. The little pizza place and stuff, that all makes sense there. You can walk down the street, get your pizza, and take it back to your house. It works for a neighborhood business area. But, the drive-through and the traffic that it brings and
So
things.
you're restricting, but you're saying between 14 in Main south to Normandy or wherever Clausen starts
Yeah,
specifically,
Normandy.
that area, eliminate the possibility of any type of drive-up fast food.
Yeah, drive-through, yeah.
I mean,
If we're all in agreement with that, we just do it, we just scratch it.
say it one more time.
If we're all in agreement with that, we just scratch it off of our,
I mean, I don't see
drop
any
it.
reason not to agree with it. I don't foresee the fact that, like you said, any fast food place would want to be there, and
Yeah.
if they did, would we really want that there? I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of,
Can you go
taking
back
the
and-
suggestion.
Joe, and clarify, I mean, because we're talking about fast foods as in major chains, but there is a convenience factor for, a takeout window that doesn't get utilized like it's not like there's constantly 10 cars lined up ready to go. I hate to hinder the ability for, in a pandemic type setting, people got uniquely, I know like Lebanese Grill, it's obviously a totally different area in Troy, but they created a takeout window
Sure.
so you don't have to step inside. That's my only concern if we're taking away some innovation from a place where, how do you kind of specify between?
Well,
the
Woodpile
fast
has a
food-
drive-up window like you're describing. Woodpile has that, but you
wa-
do
yeah,
have
like
to
a
walk up to
walkout.
it.
Yeah.
You're not going to, we use the term drive-up, and I probably shouldn't even use it, right? They have a carry-out window,
Carry out window, okay.
and that they have, and that can be accommodated.
Yeah, that could
I
be
think
accommodated.
We're talking more about the actual drive-through.
To have
but
specific,
carry-out
yeah.
windows, if Barb's Pizza wanted to put a carry-out window someplace in their building, I'm sure that they could, and no one would
Right.
be opposed to that.
If you wanted to do a walk-up, the ice cream place has a walk-up window, right? But yeah, if you wanted to do walk-up windows, absolutely, you could do that. It's just, we're not going to be queuing cars at a drive-through window, and we're not going to be ordering off a board from the drive-through. Most of that's done online anyway now, but yeah, a walk-up window, absolutely, you could do that.
Okay.
Yep.
So is this going to be separate, like a separate motion then? Do you need this to be a motion on its own, or is this part of like what we're sending to council?
Well, we would need a public hearing at the planning commission on this. Strictly speaking, we don't need a public hearing on signs at the planning commission to send it to council, but we could include it in the public hearing, and I think it's prudent to do that, just so that the public is aware and gets a chance to see it and weigh in on it. Because it's a general ordinance, it's not in the zoning ordinance, so technically we don't have to hold a public hearing on it. But if we're gonna hold a public hearing on drive-through uses and gas stations, putting that stuff in the zoning ordinance, I think you hold a public hearing on signs as well. And let people give you their input and reactions to what they're seeing in the draft language.
Okay.
But we could decide to make a motion to clarify it in our minutes. It says that it's in accordance with the master plan for the BRD1 district and all the constraints that are there, we have decided as a planning commission to eliminate that wording because it no longer makes sense from my perspective, it no longer makes sense with the master plan.
Sure, yeah.
And therefore, it shouldn't be in the zoning ordinance.
is that a motion?
Sounded like it to me.
Anybody want to second that?
I think
Second.
It's part of, okay.
We might as well. I mean, come on, we're all on the same page. There's no reason to like drag it on, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't meet the intent and purpose. I agree. Yeah.
I think we all, I mean, I think.
Can you just kill it without a roll call, or do you want us to call roll on it?
Well, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay,
Done.
we gotcha.
Great.
Great. Good job.
Good job.
But then if we are going to set a public hearing, then we would need to do that as well. So it's a matter of when we're setting it for, when we can get the notice in. So I'm just going to bring up a calendar here. Let me see, our next meeting, we cannot notice for our next meeting, because that's the 25th. So that puts us into November, where we would look at November 8th as the first available date.
We can't have a meeting on November 8th. That's a
That's
national election day.
true, we have an election. So it would put it on the 22nd, which I believe is the week of Thanksgiving. Yes. So that might also be one that we might not want to
Yeah, it's
have
good
a
at
public
Christmas.
hearing on, because a lot of people are going to have a lot of other things on their mind, which would mean December 13th. And, yeah, sign ordinance and those things moving to the zoning ordinance. So December 13th would be the date that we would set a hearing for.
Okay, I make a motion to set a public hearing on the sign ordinance and the drive-through, removal of drive-through
And-
for.
And gas,
Sorry?
and moving gas station pump standards also to the
Oh,
zoning
sorry, and
ordinance.
moving gas station pump what?
Standards.
Standards, sorry. For December 13th, 2022.
Support.
Motion, support, any nays? Let's do it this way. Yeah. Everybody for this? Seeing no nays, I think it passes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
support
Mr.
it.
Fitzer supported it. yeah.
Fitzer.
Okay, just writing the motion down here.
Shall we move on then?
Yes, we can move on to the next thing.
Agenda item number 9 is the additional zoning ordinance discussion on multifamily parking and pole barns.
Right, so this is continued from last time. And we had another issue last time that was on the agenda. We were talking about parking standards for by appointment only uses, and we decided not to do anything with that. So we're just keeping our discussion going on these other two items. So, starting with accessory buildings. I'll just give the whole background here because some of you weren't here last time. We have a new member. Let's just go through it. We have had a recent uptick in the number of people requesting to construct pole barn buildings as accessory buildings. And in some cases, they're proposed as garages, and in others, they're proposed as storage buildings. And currently, our ordinance permits accessory buildings as follows on residential sites. On any one single-family residential lot, not more than one private garage and one storage shed shall be erected. Shed is defined elsewhere in the ordinance as a storage building not exceeding 200 square feet. So you can't have a 600 square foot shed in a garage. It's a 200 square foot shed maximum and a garage. The way our language reads, it doesn't matter if the garage is attached or detached. You get a garage and a storage shed. The ordinance also doesn't have any explicit compatibility standard for accessory buildings. Historically, the ordinance has been interpreted to require accessory buildings to be in harmony with the neighborhood. And that raises a couple questions. So one, are we interested in adopting a more explicit compatibility standard for accessory buildings? That might not necessarily exclude pole barn construction, but it would require even a pole barn to meet certain appearance standards. And then the second question, does the planning commission feel that when a garage is attached to the house, a second accessory building that's not a garage but can exceed the size limit for sheds should be permitted? So addressing the compatibility standard first, I gave a little bit of potential language, and this was reflected in a lot of other zoning ordinances. I changed the wording a little bit, but this type of standard is pretty common. The exterior finished materials and colors of any accessory building other than a shed, as defined in this ordinance, shall match or complement the principal building. Where determination of compatibility cannot be reached by the building department, the application may be referred to the planning commission for a final determination. So we're basically saying the garage has to look like it goes with the house. And that's, like I said, an extremely common standard. It's really not unreasonable. We've exempted the small sheds because the small sheds, you're picking something up at Home Depot and it's, might be made of plastic and it's going in the backyard. And we're not going to make people make that match their house. If you've got a half brick front, we don't need a half brick facade on your little garden shed. But if you've got yellow siding on your house and you're putting up a garage, we're looking for a garage that kind of looks like the house or matches the house. So you might be looking for perhaps yellow siding on the garage. And it doesn't matter if it's stick-built or a pole barn, we're looking for the appearance to be compatible with the house. We're looking for something that's not out of place on the lot. And, as long as they're meeting the building requirements for rat walls and things like that, we're not as concerned with the underlying construction of the structure so long as it looks right. So that's the first part of it. We'll get to the second question. But I just wanted your reaction to that
So the
potential
first
language
part,
first.
Joe, first of all, so pole barns, are these being requested by residential homes?
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming they have to be just deep lots, right?
To fit one, yeah, you'd probably need one. The thing is, with the way our ordinance is currently written, you get the garage and the shed, and if you're proposing something that's not a garage, technically that's not permitted, although if you have one garage bay in it, you could call it a garage and kind of get it through. Yeah, there a couple of them have been. It's not like a deluge or something. It's not like we're getting asked about these things every day. But we've never really seen them in the past, and all of a sudden we're getting asked about them. Cost of construction, right? Pole barns are a lot cheaper to put up in most instances than stick construction.
Well, if someone came with not a deep lot and they wanted to put a pole barn, would the restriction that we have of how, or I don't know if we even got through to that restriction, but like they would essentially be covering their backyard. If I think of the backyard size I have right now, you
Right.
wouldn't have any green space at all. It would just be a pole barn in the driveway to get to it.
Right, so you can get pole barns in a lot of different sizes, so it's not necessarily, you'd have to meet the ordinance. So the ordinance has a couple of things going on. One is that we have a lot coverage standard that says buildings can't cover more than a certain amount of the lot. So if you're on one of the smaller lots, maybe even a non-conforming lot in town, you're going to be constrained by that 35% lot coverage standard.
Okay.
So that's going to limit the size of the pole barn or accessory building that you can put up. We also have the impervious surface standard, which is kind of an expansion on that building coverage standard. And then as far as when you have a detached accessory building in your backyard, it also can't take up more than a certain percentage of the required rear yard. So you have a setback in the back, and that's your required rear yard. The building can't take up more than the percentage just left my head, but it's 25 or 50%. And so that's also going to put a constraint on it. If you were to try to put a pole barn across the whole back of your lot, it would just not meet. There's probably multiple standards you wouldn't be meeting.
Joe, for clarification, you said 50, and I won't hold you to the 50%, but like, are you saying them combined can't take, if you had one of each, they wouldn't be able to take 50%, or just
Of the required rear setback, yeah.
combined, right? Like, no matter if you put a shed, a pole barn, and a garage, potentially, it can't be more than 50%?
Yeah, yeah.
Or, okay.
But right now, you can't do the pole barn and a garage.
Right, I know, I'm
so-
saying, but you were talking
Yeah.
potential earlier too about
Yeah.
allowing.
Yeah.
And there are homes that don't have garages in
Right.
Clausen that would potentially be putting a pole barn in substitute in lieu, like you said, of garage, right?
Right. So, well, if we were to change the language to allow it to just be a generic accessory building and not a garage, yes. If we keep the garage language, then it's got to be a garage.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, the garage has a square footage and a driveway,
What's that?
right? The garage has a square footage and a driveway. The shed has a square footage.
Yep.
So potentially, what's the scenario of a pole barn unless we're allowing, based on lot size, a garage and a shed and a barn, or a garage and a barn, but no shed? What's,
So right now,
where are we going with this, and what makes sense in a residential neighborhood?
Right.
If you go up out in the sticks,
Sure.
you can see many small, sometimes just manufactured homes, and then next to it, a menu, all right, the guy decided what was going on, or the mechanic decided what was going on, because they just wanted to do all this work in their great big shed. But maybe that's not Clausen.
right. So right now, you can have the garage and the shed, and you can't, even if the garage is attached, you can't have the other use accessory building that's above 200 square feet. So that's the second question there is, should we think about that? Well, I don't know that I would recommend changing what you've got, because you're right, it is more of a rural thing for people to have their, I have seen pole barns that are much larger than the house, definitely. Yeah, I think that right now the garage and shed standard that you have is pretty much what you need for a city like Clausen. You got small lots and people on top of each other, and you don't allow accessory or home occupations to occur in an accessory building. So what would that accessory building be for? There's some
That was
questions.
already before the zoning board about 6 or 7 years ago for a new construction house. South Marias, maybe. He took 2 lots, he built a very nice house,
Sure.
and all of a sudden he wanted a large accessory building out back. And the statement was, well, I got a lot of toys that I tinker with, And then the question was, well, you got a garage, it's attached to the house, and this is bigger than the 200, whatever the size of the shed is, at 200 square feet or
200
whatever it
square
is.
feet, yeah.
So, and no, you can't put a driveway to the shed.
Right.
Was it a deep lot too that we were talking about?
It wasn't deep, but it was a double wide. It was
Yeah.
2
Wide,
lots.
but not deep, okay.
They built a nice ranch on it. So the scenario is, where do we want to say that large accessory buildings are not congruent to the residential district in Clawson. I don't know if that's true or not, but gee whiz, if my neighbor wanted to build a pole barn, you go to the question, well, what the heck you gonna be doing out there? And if you're gonna be welding at 4 a.m, you know, maybe that's not the thing you're supposed to be doing back there, so.
Aren't we kind of overstepping on what people are supposed to do on their property too, a little here with this, like, it's bizarre to me that we're like trying to regulate what people do on their property.
Well, that's the whole point of a zoning
Yeah.
ordinance.
But
That's all
like,
we do.
in a
Regulate
way-
what people do. That's all we do. Regulate what people do.
Yeah, I mean, well, especially when I think about the Airbnb conversations that I'm sure are coming anyway. But like, well, people say that that's a property right to have an Airbnb, but yet we're like worried about them welding in a garage. Like, I could see completely why someone would want an extra exterior building if it's to scale, meeting, you know, with our yards. And I don't think it's unacceptable to ask it to be to scale, but I don't necessarily know that I would say they're not allowed to have what's the difference between that and like a greenhouse that they build on the back? Obviously, I know structurally, aesthetically, there's a difference there, but like, sure, you can have a greenhouse and a sunroom back there, but oh, no, not the pole barn. It seems, are you understanding like kind of where I'm going? Like, yeah, you can sit there and drink coffee, but don't weld in a pole barn. I get the aesthetics. I feel like there's a way we can to scale, have people kind of like not be obnoxious with the pole barn. And also like we talked about last time with the window and make it look aesthetically congruent with the neighborhood in a garage. But I guess who am I to say that somebody doesn't want a greenhouse, but they want a pole barn instead because they have toys to tinker with? That's okay.
Can the building that they're tinkering in be a?
Joe, speak up, please.
Can the
I'm sorry.
building that they're tinkering in be a garage though? I mean,
See,
that's sort of.
are you asking like, am I suggesting that they should be able to pave to it? Or what do you mean? Like a garage to store like a classic car maybe that they might go tinker with?
Right.
I guess I
mean-
don't see a problem, but if they're like paving half their backyard to tinker with the car, or like a four-wheeler or something like that they take up north on the weekends and they don't pay for, I don't know. I just feel like it's a little bit too much of us to like decide what's acceptable in terms of like what's tinkering or not.
I guess the point is that we already do.
I-
So
yeah.
it's a matter of, are we staying where we are, or are we loosening that?
And
I
away
guess.
from the use, I think what he was starting to talk about was compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the original question. What's
Mm-hmm.
compatible with the neighborhood? Is a pole barn, if a pole barn, if it's just the construction, so somebody is using it, just, they don't have a garage, and they're just putting out as much building as they can for storage, and it's a pole barn construction, and it looks like a barn in their backyard, but it meets the setbacks, and it does have a big garage door, but it doesn't have a driveway going through it, but he just wanted that kind of entrance, because that's how the kit comes. Is a big pole barn what's compatible? How do we determine what's compatible with the neighborhood? And those are the questions we've been facing.
Yeah.
So that's the question.
And really, I would think that we'd want to have a different kind of setback criteria for that, wouldn't we? If we did allow it. I know that there's a lot of nays, but like, would it help if it was not close to the house so that it wasn't very much street visible? Or do you feel like it's
Just came
just,
back to compatible. What's compatible? Is a pole barn compatible with the neighborhood?
Do
I-
they fit more than do they fit in our city?
well, I did see a house in Royal Oak the other day, and I thought of our prior conversation that had a complete metal roof. I don't know what you mean by compatible. I don't know.
A pole barn, you know how a pole barn looks.
I know
right?
it's got a metal roof and it's,
No, it's not just the roof, the whole thing. You know how it looks. Does
Yes.
it fit? Will it fit in your backyard?
It won't fit in mine,
Oh, but so
but there
what are we
are,
talking
my
about?
house is not a standard either. Well, I guess it's probably more standard, but there's John M. You know, there's a lot of deep lots there that I could see where you can make it fit. Is it different than like a playhouse? I don't know. I guess scale is everything when I'm thinking
Well, let
of
me ask a
that.
question, because she's talking about it won't fit on certain lots, but okay, so in point 2, you say, does the commission feel that when a garage is attached to a house, a second accessory building is not a garage, but cannot exceed the size limit for the sheds that should be permitted? But let's say that we went to a point and said, no, you can't build a pole barn, and we have parameters for that on most standard on lots in Clawson, all lots. But then someone does have a deep lot that we have on a couple of the different areas. Can they try and apply for a special permit to build that? Would that be possible of something they could receive? Or if we say no, there just can't happen within Clawson, whether it's a deep lot, whether it's a double lot, they just can't have that?
Right now, it'd be a variance that you'd go for, and showing that you have a practical difficulty to get the variance just to build a bigger
have to prove it
storage
to the
building
ZBA.
is pretty hard.
So it'd be difficult for someone to do,
Yeah.
but it's a possibility.
They have an avenue to pursue, yeah, and if they can somehow show a practical difficulty, they could get a variance for it, but again, what's the practical difficulty of I can't put up a big barn in my backyard?
I guess I asked that question because I think I agree with some people on the board where I don't see the reasoning for a pole barn in the backyard of a Clawson resident. There just doesn't seem to be. Yes, there are some deep lots that potentially these people could find justification for it because of their depth of their lot. But as a rule, our lots are small. Any kind of pole barn just to me seems like it would be just a detriment to a street or a visual. But if someone truly had that type of a lot and they could feasibly see doing it, then let them go through the variant process. And if they can, good for them. If they can't, well, that's unfortunate, but this is, that's where we live.
Are you seeing a lot of people that are coming in? I know you mentioned at the beginning construction costs and things like that. To get a permit for a potential pole barn that kind of in the back of your head, like, yeah, they just want to kind of use it as a garage kind of thing.
There've been a couple.
Is that-
There've been
okay.
There've been a couple.
Okay.
Sorry, do we have a definition on what pole barn entails? Is it size? Is it just construction? I mean, I know what they look like, but I'm trying to think
It's a type
about
of
this.
construction, yeah, and you can modify them to look like pretty much anything.
Right.
But yeah, it's a type of construction, typically comes from a kit that's just different from our typical stick-built construction where you're building it on the lot.
A shed comes in a kit form, and you can just put that right on the ground
Yeah.
with no foundation. But a pole barn, I think, it has to have a
It has to have a
foundation,
foundation, and it's
rat
a
wall.
metal framework,
yeah.
usually aluminum nowadays. Some of the larger ones still have a steel frame, but
Yeah, I think when we're talking about pole barns, we're all thinking of the giant toy garage.
Right,
Where
yeah.
I'm just considering in certain cases, if you have the lot size and say somebody wanted to have a pottery studio or something completely different, like something that's smaller, but would we define that as a pole barn if it exceeds the 200? I'm trying to get the,
right. It just wouldn't be
use.
permitted if it exceeds the 200
Right.
square feet at this point.
But they wouldn't be permitted to even put like a legit outbuilding there either, right? Like,
No.
they
Not-
can't
not
build
at
a
the moment.
stick thing out there either.
They can't at
Yeah.
the moment, no.
So then what I hear is that we're, as the planning commission, are asking for specific definitions. We define the residence, we define the garage, attached or not attached. We define a shed and its requirements.
Yes, we define all three of those things. yeah.
Okay, so are we now looking at a accessory building?
That would be it's a fourth category.
Defining an accessory building and make it relative to lot size and say, okay, if you have a garage, a house, and an accessory building, not the shed, or the accessory building and the shed, or however we want to put that together, but you say, if you want an accessory building, it's got to have some other different proportionality and access and a definition of utilities. So maybe that's what people are looking for, because characteristically, in my understanding, I think going with many of the people have said, a pole barn type is different from a shed in that you want to be able to use it not just to open the door and put things in like a shed, but you want to be out there, so you're going to want heating and you're going to want electricity. And I know in other communities, if you have heating and electricity, you can't have water. And if you have water and electricity, you can't have heating, because otherwise it becomes a residence
Yeah.
or the potential for a residence. Once you got heat, water, and electricity to a structure,
Sure.
you'd have to be a really, really, really good code enforcement officer to figure out what's going inside of that building once it's constructed, if you have those utilities. So maybe there are instances. I do know that there is one location over on the east side of the city that the backyard abuts to a cul-de-sac. And the applicant said, I got a real small garage on my front, but I got this great big long lot, and I park back there because I could get in through the cul-de-sac. I got a cut. Why can't I put a garage back there? And we got into this discussion about, well, you can't have two garages, and then I know that one was approved by the zoning board as practical difficulty, that the front garage and the area in the front of the house just didn't allow for the expansion of the garage. But I think that's where you're going. You're going looking at the definition of a accessory building. So a third structure on the lot that's, and the third structure not being a shed.
Right. It's a fourth category of dwelling, garage, shed, other,
Accessory building.
yeah.
And a greenhouse.
But are you saying, are we going for definition, or are we going for size? I mean, can't we just say?
Well, that would be the definition, and then in order to give somebody a reasonable expectation of being compatible and proportional, you'd have to say, your lot usage, your access, all of this kind of stuff has to have some criteria. So you just can't say, well, gee whiz, now my backyard is this massive accessory building, and I've only got, three blades of grass running around it,
Well, we already have ordinances that protect against that too, and like you said, we can.
But we don't have the ordinance that says I'm only using 15% of my square footage of my lot area.
Well, that's if you, yeah, I
And-
guess if you're talking, Jen,
And,
on.
I can use up to, in a
Right.
residential area, Joe said 35, I don't remember what it was.
35,
But whatever it is, if it's 35 and you're only using 15, you go,
That's,
I got 20% here, so this proportionality to your land mass that you can do it might be into consideration, and, it might, a 20 by 20 accessory building might not be out of proportion in someone's backyard, because it's really big, but in my backyard, it would, give me 3 blades of grass I could go on with kitchen scissors, So
Sure.
if that's what we're asking for, if that's what the residents are asking for, then we ought to come up with something that's reasonable.
I agree, and I think we can also regulate height. We can regulate garage, whether or not we want to allow a garage door on it. Like if we wanted it to be a certain setback from, the front view of a home, that can happen too. Like, aren't there ways that we can kind of allow accommodation within reason?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
So just for clarity, I think I got a little lost in some of the discussion. The current ordinance is spelling out that properties are allowed one garage, one shed, period, right? I mean,
Period,
there's
yeah.
more to that, right?
Exactly.
But now it sounds like we want to open up the discussion of if we want to allow a resident to add an accessory building in addition to the garage and shed. Is that where we're going? Because if the ordinance already says one garage, one shed, and it's defined, regardless of the ratio, I mean, it is what it is. So do we need to make it more complicated?
I like that.
This conversation came up because we had people come in and they don't have a garage, they had a small shed, they're gonna take it out. Now they're gonna put in a pole barn because that construction is inexpensive to do and materials are readily available. You can get the kit. So if it meets the setback, not gonna have it's basically just gonna be a big storage unit.
Right.
But is pole barn the construction that you wanna see in even if it meets the standards, the setbacks, the lot coverage?
No, I
Is
understood.
that
I just
what-
heard the
is that what-
conversation going in a different direction, and
The
I just wanted to make
conversation
sure.
has kinda-
I agree with
Has
exactly what
kinda
he's saying.
gone,
But he isn't saying, he's
So
saying
go
right
back
now,
to-
we have
to this.
standards for a garage, attached or not attached, and a shed. And that's what our standards are. And if you're buying a house in Clawson, that's what you get. Now, you just brought up, though, a house that doesn't have a garage. And that
Right.
is a different,
So
instance
it falls
there.
on, the accessory buildings still have standards. You know, there's height, there's distance from the lot line, there's lot coverage, all those things still come into play. And it just came down to, is a pole barn, is the pole
How do
barn
you make it
compatible
compatible?
with the neighborhood? Is it compatible in this, so you've got a ranch home, not that big of a lot, but your lot coverage allows this size building. Is that pole barn look what they wanna see in Clawson? And that's what the building official was asking when these plans start coming in. Is that something you consider compatible with the area?
I think the part
Does
of
it
the,
need to have more windows put in it? Does
Yeah.
it need to look like those?
See.
When you buy a little shed kit and it comes with windows and the doors like this, and it looks like a little playhouse kind of thing, or is that how it should look if we're gonna allow pole barns? Or should it just be sheet metal and a big door?
And,
Is
yeah,
that-
so the matching the house is the
the
standard. I
problem
came up
Right.
with.
seems to lie in the appearance of the building. Say,
Right.
this couple
Not the
have-
construction, it's
So
the
this couple has a
appearance.
house and they don't have a garage, and they want to put up a pole barn. Why don't they put up a 2-car or a 3-car garage?
Because of the cost. And they don't want to use it as a garage. They have a smaller house and they just want a lot of things and another play area for the kids. And they're not gonna put a driveway back to it, so it doesn't, the impervious surface, it meets all
So-
those standards. It's just a pole barn.
So as we stand now, they're not allowed to do that. They could put up a garage if they wanted to,
Could
but
put a
they,
garage, yeah. So you wind up with a roll-up door that kind of makes it a garage, but then there's no driveway going to it.
Right.
yeah, I've seen several of those. Yeah.
So again, it just comes back to what's compatible with the neighborhood? What, do you wanna say that, oh yeah, pole barns are fine, but do you wanna see what's compatible with the house in the neighborhood? That was just our question when it came to the building plans.
Yeah, because your garage could be a pole barn, and it's just a matter of how you dress it up. And if we require that it be dressed up to look like the house, then we've kind of solved the compatibility problem. And then as for whether we want to consider other things, that's kind of a separate question that we can certainly discuss, and we are discussing it. But in terms of just solving the compatibility issue, are we okay with the paragraph that was provided? And if we are, we move that along and then revisit the rest of the conversation as needed.
I think you have to look at it because going with this scenario, that might satisfy the owner today. But they win the lottery and move to California and the house goes up for sale.
And we're stuck with a pole barn.
And somebody comes up and says, well, they put this accessory building in the back of the lot, and there's no driveway for it, and gee whiz, now I want to take next to my house and put a car a stall and a half garage, because I really need protection in this terrible Michigan winter to get from there to my house. And what are we gonna say?
Take the barn down and put the garage up.
Or put the driveway all the way to the back and use it as a garage?
Right.
Yeah, it's sticky, yeah.
It establishes a whole bunch of,
Right. Well, can we separate the two issues? Let's focus on compatibility. Are we okay with that paragraph for compatibility? Where it's got to match or complement the principal building?
So
Are we
you
saying
talk
for a
about the
pole barn?
paragraph that starts with
For
our language
any
reads-
accessory building.
So this will be
Doesn't
a,
matter how it's built.
okay.
Joe, which paragraph are you referring to? Are you talking about the paragraph that starts, the way our language reads, a garage and a storage shed are permitted on any residential site? Are you talking about that paragraph? Or which paragraph did you
There's
say?
one below
It's
this.
the one,
Potential
it says
language?
potential language.
Oh, potential, okay, got it.
And then if we do continue the conversation about a potential other building, this would cover that too, because it wouldn't be a shed, so it would have to meet that compatibility standard. So I'm just thinking, this is a simple thing that we can throw in there to give the building inspector or building official, sorry, some
Apparently Joan
some
agrees. I
guidance
see her nodding
for
her
right
head,
now.
yes, so Joan agrees.
And then we can have that other conversation and figure out what we want to do with that. But for right now, he just needs some direction on compatibility.
But if we didn't give people the right to build pole barns, would we need that potential language?
Correct. We'll essentially defeat it, right? If we don't allow it.
Well, I mean, ultimately, a compatibility standard is going to apply to any type of construction. So it's just sort of insurance at that point. You know, if people are coming in for stick construction again because the cost of construction goes back down, well, we've got a compatibility standard that they're probably going to be meeting anyway, and it's not really a burden for them.
Okay,
But it raises the bar a little bit for the pole barn construction.
So it raises the bar, meaning making it more difficult for that.
It makes it a little bit more difficult because you're going to have to come up with some cladding for it that makes it match the house. And it's not just going to be that corrugated metal exterior that they come with.
But if you didn't change, like it was brought up earlier, if you didn't change anything in the way it was right now, do you need to have the potential language? Like, is there been some type of a problem like that? Potential language would have to go in there?
Well, yeah, that's the whole idea is that the building officials had trouble determining
Okay. I understand
compatibility
that.
with the neighborhood. So we're trying to get to a compatibility standard in there that he can look to say, all right, this basically matches the house, or no, it doesn't. You have to do something else with it.
I can see
And
that.
it gives him something to point to,
Right.
just to ensure that there's a little bit more.
But then let me ask this question. If you added that potential language, can we also still keep something in there that says, but right now the standard is, if you've got an attached garage or a loose garage, you can have a shed and that's it? Is there any reason that we need to get rid of that?
Well, right now, I mean, we can keep it, and then if we want to add to it per the discussion tonight, we can do that in the future. Don't have to do anything with it right now. Well, really, the imperative thing is that the building official needs some guidance.
And this is enough guidance, just the potential language, you feel
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, this
To
is building
nix it?
building departments all over the state use similar language like this.
but it says an accessory building. Where do we define accessory buildings in our residential areas?
It's defined in our ordinance.
Where do we permit accessory buildings other than a shed or a garage?
Those are the only two types of accessory buildings we permit. But they're both accessory buildings.
Yeah.
So they're accessory building is a category, and a shed and a garage are types of accessory buildings. So referring to accessory buildings covers any potential accessory building, and if we were to expand the types of accessory buildings we're permitting, that language would cover anything we were to permit.
So this language isn't included in our garage, in our accessory already?
No.
Already people can have a purple garage if they wanted to?
Sort of, yeah. There's some broader compatibility language that talks about the neighborhood and stuff, but it's harder to deal with than what we've got here.
Okay. I don't see any problem with the language.
I got a question, probably for Rennis. Is this body allowed to make a motion maybe to not allow pole barns? Are we allowed to do that, or that's for council?
To not allow pole barns?
Correct.
That's more of a building.
Yeah, it's a building
Code.
standard build, I agree with Joe. I think will be, you wouldn't define it in such fashion, I don't think. I don't think it would be up to this body wouldn't have the authority to be able to deprive people of that ability overall. I
By
think
type of
sometimes, yeah,
construction.
by type, exactly. I think, sometimes our ordinances operate that way, where we limit the use de facto, even with but without stating it. We want to be careful with respect to it. But yeah, I think the answer is no.
So, I mean, I guess my question is, can we add this paragraph here to our public hearing coming up in December?
Yes.
I think you're opening a can of worms you don't want to open.
Absolutely, absolutely.
With the potential language? you're
Yes.
saying?
By saying anything, unless you define to a reasonable residential person or reasonable contractor, what is permitted. Shed by definition is a place where you store your garden and outdoor tools, maybe your pool supplies.
Shed is defined in our ordinance.
Right.
It has.
And a
definition.
garage is the place to park your vehicle, and it has a driveway. So,
And it's also defined in our ordinance.
and they are by definition accessory buildings, I understand that. But what you're talking about now is a different use, and then you can come up with,
But we're not talking about a different use. The only two types of accessory buildings we permit are garage and shed. So
why
when
are
we
we-
refer
so-
to accessory buildings here, those are the only two things we're referring to, because that's all you can do.
So if the pole barn construction was 199 square feet, it's fine.
This wouldn't allow for pole barns.
Why?
This is just
Well,
adding
sure it would.
Well, it
language.
would if it's a garage.
Yeah.
No.
Considered, I'm
if it's
sorry,
a garage,
construction for a garage instead.
Yeah, if you make a garage with a pole barn kit, yeah, absolutely. But this means it has to have some compatibility with the house that's on the property as well.
That's a different statement.
So I would love if Ed would elaborate some more, because like right now, I'm looking at language that fits what we need. Have a garage, attached or not attached, you can have a shed, that's all you can have. I love that language, personal opinion. But Ed's saying if you add this potential language or something that could through there, and I just want to hear a little bit more on that, if you could
It
elaborate more.
doesn't
Ed.
expand what's permitted. It just refers to the category accessory building, and there are two types of accessory building that we permit. And then if you were to permit a third type, it would also cover the third type.
But why do we have to change anything? If it's saying those two things in there, and we're happy with it, why are we looking?
Because
to-
the building official is having trouble with the other compatibility language in our ordinance, and we're trying to give him some direction as to how to determine whether or not the garage or whatever it is being proposed is compatible. So we're just enhancing his ability to do his job, and someone comes in and wants to put up a garage that's pole barn construction, and they're just showing us a corrugated metal exterior. He's looking at that and saying, does this fit?
But this doesn't change any of our ordinance in a way that it allows for more or it excludes anything. It's just helping to deeper define it, correct?
Exactly. It's just
Okay.
helping the
So
building
we're not,
official
I
out.
mean, the ordinance yesterday allowed for pole barns, just like this one does. It's just defining in a way that we can really narrow it
Exactly,
down.
yeah.
I'm okay
So-
with accepting it.
It's a large shed.
So since we had all of this discussion, I think that my area here is that there are no concrete examples. And if you're going to make this something for the building department to do, I believe you need to have concrete examples in here such that the exterior appearance of the accessory building
Materials?
should be similar or enhanced in materials to the main structure.
That's literally what it says.
As
Yeah.
defined, it shall match or complement the
It's
principal
close to
building.
that. I don't know if it's
That's-
exactly.
that's
Could
what it
make it a more
says.
specific.
Complement the principal building, shall match or complement principal building. I feel like this is pretty simple, guys. Like, can we, I don't think we need to beat this any further.
I agree. I think
I agree.
we are beating a dead horse. I mean, if you're saying these standards are going to stay, the other top ones that you first read.
Right.
And in that potential language, I agree. I think we are. And I don't know, Joe, and maybe this is me and maybe I didn't understand correctly, but I feel like if it could have been put to us a little differently to start with, I don't know that this discussion would have went on quite as lengthy as it did. Because once I understand that, I like the standards we have. Let's
Sure.
keep those standards. If this
Yeah, I
potential
think
language helps
question
the
2
building.
probably opened the conversation a little
Yeah.
more than we needed
Well,
to, but.
Match or complement is, does match or complement mean same color? Does it mean
It says materials and color too, though, at the beginning of the sentence. The exterior
exterior
finish.
finish materials and colors? Materials and colors.
But I think the complement portion of it is, let's say you have brick wainscoting on your house and like a glacier gray siding, and you do the whole garage in the glacier gray siding. You don't necessarily have to match the proportion of the wainscoting with the brick on your garage. It's still complementing the main building. You got the same color and the same basic material, but we're not making you like match note for note what you've got on the house. That's really what the complement is getting at.
Joan, does your building department feel as though this gives them the tools and ability to do what they need to do?
What we
And
used when it came up before was, in order to complement in order to look like it complemented the home, the neighborhood, put some windows on it, not just all, sheet metal. Give it some windows, give it more of a garage look, so it looked like it fit in a residential neighborhood, not just a big pole barn.
and you think this stuff, potential language would allow them to act on that? Because it doesn't define windows or
No,
anything.
it doesn't.
So do you feel like that's needed?
That's how we've
But,
been using it.
plenty of garages don't have
half an hour
windows. I
requires
mean,
a
Right, but I mean,
In my opinion.
Joe, does this require a
still
motion?
discretionary.
it does require a motion, yeah. You'd be adding it to the public hearing in December.
So it's going to be added where?
Into the
December.
accessory building standards,
Into-
which is section,
So in the accessory building standards, which I don't recall all of it, it talks about
512.
things to do, and then it's going to say a bullet point about this sentence, and I better understand it. I think I may have taken us down a wrong road here, but I think I understand it now. The exterior finish and colors, all right. It's going to go in and it's going to make sense.
Right, yeah, exactly. It fits
All
into
right.
section 512, yep.
All right, that would be the thing. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that on this potential language for exterior finish and colors of accessory building to give definition be added to the zoning ordinance. I believe it's section 512.
Yep.
I'll second that.
I have a motion, support. Roll call, please.
We do it all by ayes or nays, or like we did before?
Well, I can do the roll call.
Okay.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Sanaki,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Yes.
And Mr. Hare is absent, so. Oh, sorry, you're at the beginning and I started in the middle. Mr. Fitzer? I'm not used to doing this, it's Nick's job.
Motion passes. Let's move on to agenda item number 10 is other business.
Yeah, I had one other thing, but I'm going to skip it tonight because Rennis has something to talk about that's important, and I think we just don't need to spend time on the other issue. We'll talk about it next time.
Okay, agenda item number 11 is the planner's report.
Can I bring up something for other business real quick? Just a question, or
It's
should
real
I
quick.
wait? Should I wait for a question?
If it's real quick, yeah.
Okay, in terms of, I received an email from the superintendent talking about they're holding a open house, or I don't know, community forum in discussion of what's going on at the school properties. I was wondering if there's any updates in terms of new superintendent, how we're moving forward with that, and where we're at on that.
You're talking about the master plan amendment?
Yeah, sure. The use of Shalom and Baker.
It's on hold at the moment still. And if we do move forward with it, it would be after discussion with the new superintendent. But at the moment, that project is on hold.
And do we have something coming up? Do you have an idea of when we might be discussing B&B and rental ordinance? Oh, that's what you're here
In,
for?
like,
Oh,
2
did you already say
minutes.
that? Okay, all right, thanks. Okay,
Time-
those were my
time
only
for it.
2 questions.
Okay, planner's report.
I've probably said enough for the evening. I'm leaving for the MAP conference tomorrow up on Mackinac Island. From what I understand, I'm going to have a very rough ride to the island. And I'll be giving a presentation on Thursday, kind of about what we've been doing for RRC, documenting your processes and basically preparing your city for the day when the people who are working there now leave and someone else has to come in and pick up all the pieces. So that's what I'll be doing for the next few days.
Why a rough ride?
There are gale force winds in effect right now,
Oh, wow.
and they're expected to continue through the end of the day tomorrow.
Oh, boy,
So
that
yeah,
should,
it's going to be interesting.
Great.
Drive safe.
Yeah.
Joan, you have any?
I don't think there was, you got the report, were there any questions? I know I can give you a little bit of an update on the Bywood and Phillips home construction, the ones that are stalled that we have been able, our fire marshal has been real good at doggedly taking care of trying to get rid of the propane tanks, and we now have a commitment from the propane company that they will come and empty them and remove them as soon as possible, whatever their definition of as soon as possible is. So,
Any truth to the rumor that Lucky Duck is gone?
they did close.
They did close.
Why was that? Do you have any idea? Were you able to shocking. Was it even a year?
They seemed like they were doing really well, too.
That's just shocking. With all the money he put in that building and as beautiful as it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a vague Facebook post.
Pardon me?
There was a vague Facebook post about,
Right, he took it down after a
Okay.
day,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
that's all I saw.
Yep. Very sad that that had to happen, but I don't know specifically what the issue was.
I mean, I would feel like that should be easy to fill with everything he did redesigned. It should be
Right.
easy to
And
find.
he was a tenant, so I'm sure that the building owner is actively pursuing another tenant.
So we lost the
did a lot
duck,
of
but we
work.
still got the chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Joan.
Gotta be optimistic.
I think it was for the capital improvement, they talked about doing the assessment over at Hunter. Has there been anything moved on that front at all?
There's nothing been moved on it yet.
No? Okay.
It still needs to, something needs to
assessed?
be done, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Staff report and training opportunities. That's what we've had listed on our agenda, correct?
That was kind of the staff report.
Right.
Okay. Now, the highlight of the evening, our legal update.
Great setup, and thank you. I'm not sure that that's the highlight.
Really
but-
highlighted your evening, I don't know about mine.
Precisely. I think I agree with Mr. Watson. Good evening, thank you for having us. Council has been talking for some time now with respect to a couple of proposed ordinances dealing with rentals, both short-term and just regular rentals. And the focus has been the registration and inspection process concerning the rentals. Council has reviewed it several times. There's been proposed amendments to it. Eventually, at the last meeting, they asked that all the boards, but particularly the main boards in the city, be made aware of it so that you are a part of the process, both on an individual basis as obviously people involved in our community, but as well as part of the board that you're in. Planning doesn't have any authority concerning the specific two items that we have right now in front of council. They don't deal with zoning issues. But there is thoughts and there's been conversation that potentially there could be a role for planning down the road if we expand some of the parameters when it comes to rentals as far as short-term Airbnbs are concerned and how zoning may come into play. So for that, council, I think, wisely thought it is important to involve as many people in our community as humanly possible. It is important to bring the boards in, and this is, I am sort of the emissary for you. I have, because we didn't want to confuse, we looked at the agenda, we didn't want to confuse the conversation that was happening tonight with the actual proposed ordinances. I have an email that is coming out to you, that is scheduled to come out to you with the proposed language that we have to council for your review, your consideration, so that you're aware of it. It's coming out to you at the end of this meeting, around 12 o'clock midnight tonight. So you'll have it bright and early for you in the morning. I would urge you to review it. I'm obviously here and available to all of you with respect to those two specific items. But of course, I'm available to you with any questions you have with any item at any time. I would hope that you take some time to review it, to review both ordinances. Give us your thoughts, be involved. I know some of you have been involved with respect to this process, and I think it's important. As you review them, as I indicated, no specific authority that this board has right now, but if we're thinking about potential zoning concerning Airbnbs, if we have that ability to do so down the road, I think that would be obviously squarely within your purview. And that would be down the road and in front of you to begin with, and then going forward, following the same processes that we follow before it gets to council. So not much of a highlight, Mr. Casera, but nonetheless, I think is an important topic to be had, and I would appreciate any comments that you will have down the road. Okay? Thank you.
And all comments are directed just to you.
And obviously,
And you'll share them.
I am happy and willing to take them all and to listen to everything and share them with council. Obviously, I'm not preventing anybody from going directly to council. We would encourage, I think both council, myself, and everybody else in the administration just wants as many people as part of this conversation as possible. And as you can imagine, for the obvious reasons of we're impacting the community in many ways. We're trying to register and inspect these rentals, both on the residential end for us as residents and citizens of the city, as well as on the business portion of it and property rights portion. I think this is an important conversation, so.
Okay.
Can I ask?
Sure.
So this is not proposed to be an agenda item at any particular meeting, Ben? This is kind of just a open discussion ongoing?
Yeah, for your purposes, I mean, it will be an agenda item at the next meeting, and actually, I'm glad you asked that question. We'll have it, if I know, I believe Mr. Raker will have it, the city manager will have it as an agenda item at the next meeting of council. So he'll probably include it in the agenda on Thursday, which is when it's produced, and then I believe the next meeting of council is on Tuesday. So it'll be there as a conversation, as an agenda item.
So you would advise us to be prepared to come speak at public comment?
The more the merrier, I think, is an important conversation.
Okay, Yeah, and you're saying we're speaking towards the registration process,
Yeah.
not so much the zoning or any other.
Not any of the zoning. I think, the items that we've had so far are always, again, it's been registration and inspection. And I think my thought all along was we keep it limited and, and the smaller and more direct the piece, I think the easier it'll be to handle. So registration and inspection, I think, are important rights for our building officials to have, to be able to handle some of these items. And then down the road, we would tackle on other issues. Obviously, rentals are a larger topic, so they would include a lot of facets.
Yeah, so are Airbnbs by default allowed in the community then, without the ordinance for them?
And that requires an explanation, well, not explanation, but a definition of what default means. But because I think in a lot of ways, yeah, as a matter of fact, they exist. So by default, they're allowed, right?
Right, well, okay. But okay.
That's there's some inherent difficulty with the concept. So actually, your question is fair. And I think that's the way that a lot of our communities around us have been able to parse out and deal with the issue is by setting up some of these preliminary rights for themselves. Things such as registration and the ability to inspect, so that we know both who is renting out where, whether it's the standards that we as a city apply are being upheld or not. And I think that's an important tool for the city to utilize in order to ensure health, safety, and welfare. And I think it's an important tool to be given to the building officials to be able to follow through.
I won't ask any more
No,
questions,
as
because then
many
we'll
as-
go on, because I know it's not an agenda item.
And I'm here.
I'll be at Tuesday's meeting.
Thank you. And I'm here, I'll stay around, so if anybody have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If no one has any other items, I'll entertain an adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting for Tuesday, September 11th.
Second.
Support, any nays?
Except it's October, not September.
Oh, yeah.
Will you
Jeez, I lost a
support
month
the
somewhere.
correction?
I support your amendment, I guess. We have to do a roll call?
Do you want an actual
Yes.
roll call? We can do one. Ms. Redmond?
Sure, yes.
Mr. Pitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Tinlin and Mr. Nushai.
Thank you, everyone. All right, beat 10 o'clock.
We did. So you're new.
You already have your ceremonial swearing.
I thought there'd be
Not
cake
yet.
or something, yeah. I thought there'd be cake today or something.
I got a cake in my pocket.